In this video, I'll demonstrate how to create the blade envelopes 3D model using Blender's built-in Python scripting tools. For more details regarding blade envelopes, please have a look at the Discourse blog post linked in the description. You can find the input files for this project in the GitHub link in the description. If we open up a new Blender instance and go over to the scripting tab, you can open up one of the scripts included in the GitHub repo. Let's open up, say, the first one. Now, there's a bit of a detailed description in the Discourse blog post regarding what some of these functions do, so I won't go into any detail regarding them. But say, for example, we have something like a CSV file, which contains all of the vertices that correspond to our baseline blade, something like this: a header with XYZ point coordinates. We can load up this CSV file or any other type of file effectively that Python can read in, and then we can transfer them into BPy objects and create a curve that defines our blade profile. So all we have to do in this case is have our input CSV file ready and then simply hit the run section over here, the run button. Now if we go to the layout tab, we can see a full 3D view of our nominal blade profile. If we go to edit mode, we can see all of the individual vertices that compose our blade profile. And if we select all of them and then hit E into the Z direction, we can create some depth to that profile. And if we exit out of there, we can see this is what our profile looks like now. And say, for example, we want to create some displacements from this object. We can hit Shift D to duplicate this object, then hit Escape, and that'll set the new object where it was. And then if you hit the wrench button, you can add a modifier which we can use to displace that object. And let's change this thing to 0.025, for example. And that's a certain displacement away from our nominal blade profile. And we can set that to 125, and there's another one. Now let's duplicate this object. Actually, before that, let's select this object. Let's go into edit mode again, and let's select all of the top facing ones, and then let's just grab it by pressing G, and then move it in the Z direction ever so slightly so that it doesn't have the same height as the nominal blade profile. Now if you go back to object mode, you'll see that that variation has applied to the outward displacement. Now let's duplicate this, Shift D again, Escape, and now we have our second displacement. Let's change this to 0.025. There's one that's double what it was before. Now we can select the second object, duplicate it again, hit Escape, and we can increase the size from this to 0.0375. There's another displacement, and that's all you need to get these displacements. Okay, now let's say we want to displace in the inner direction. Let's select one of these, hit Shift D, Escape to set it in place. There's our fourth one there. And let's change this thing to negative direction, 0.005. Now it's done quite well in the leading edge direction, but the trailing edge needs a bit of work. So for that, let's go to our edit mode. Actually, before that, let's just hide all of these other ones so that it's easier to visualize just this one. Before we head over to edit mode, let's select this object, hit apply for this displacement so that we apply it. Then we can go into edit mode to modify all of these individual vertices. Now, since the leading edge looks quite good, it's really just the trailing edge that needs some work. Let's select all of these, delete these vertices, and let's zoom in here, let's have a look. So there's a decent overlap here. Let's get rid of that. And let us select these vertices hit Ctrl R to create a loop cut, left click and then escape to enable that. Let's get rid of these two vertices and we can select these four vertices, then hit F to create a face among them. And then we have a decent representation of the trailing edge, a rough approximation if you will. Then let's go into object mode and that's what our profile looks like. Now let's re-enable all these other ones and here we have it. Now to create the different randomized blade profiles, let's head back to the scripting tab. Let's open up our second script that's included in the GitHub repo. And again, all of this is explained in the blog post regarding what each of these different functions do and what input files that you need. All of the input files can be found in the GitHub repo. So let's just hit run as is. And there we have it. We have our randomized set of blade profiles, 40 of them to be precise. Now let's add a plane background to our scene by going to add mesh plane. And let's give it a new material. So go to this section here, hit new, give it a name, let's call it white. Let's change our base color to be pure white. Now if we render this out, it should come out as pure white. Now because these objects here haven't been given a material type, they'll end up being white and they'll kind of merge into the background. So let's give these objects a new material. Let's call it say black. And let's change our base color so that it's pure black. And let's change alpha, so let's give it some transparency of say 0.8. And then let's do the same for the other ones. Now that we've defined a material, we can just select them. Select black, and then for the nominal blade profile as well as the inner one. And now if we render this out, the method used to generate the final images shown in the paper are slightly different. For example, these one left as flat ribbon-like objects, but rather tubes, just like these blade profiles. But this gives an idea of how to make such images using Blender. Now, if we want a better view of our 3D model, then let's go to the camera angle that we want. Let's say something like this, which shows the leading edge quite nicely. Then we can hit, actually let's zoom out a bit. Let's hit Ctrl-Alt-0, and that will set up our camera to change to this viewport. And let's hit render by hitting F12. So the light source is clearly a bit too strong, so let's select our light source and then try to reduce its power. Let's go for half that and then render it again. And there's our render. So if you want, you can move the light sources. You can move the light source a bit in the X direction, for example, in the Y. We can move it so that it's not too harsh on the leading edge. We can also change the power as I've shown to try and improve the visibility of the objects. And I should mention that the scale of the input file doesn't match the world. That's why I went with arbitrary displacement. But all that means is that your objects need to be scaled by hitting S, selecting it and then hitting S to scale it by the amount that you want. If you like this content, please hit the subscribe button, the notify bell, and also the like button. And if you've got any questions regarding this, please join the Discourse blog and post any questions you might have. Thank you.